Okay, so we are going to take a look at our calendar. And we are going to start the first morning session for today. It's going to be on position. And then later in the afternoon, I'm going to recreate a website from scratch, show how I do this. This is probably one of the most important lectures for the test itself. So you don't want to miss this lecture where I recreate a website. And then after that, we have code lab reviews. I haven't opened it up yet. I'll open it up after this lecture. Then we would go here to the code review tab and enter our name in a time slot. So you can do it today. You can save it for Friday or Monday or Tuesday. Okay, so we'll open that up. I'll let you guys know as soon as that's open. And okay, let's go ahead and dive into the lecture. So let's look at this card here. Anything unusual about this card? Something here that seems out of the ordinary for what we've introduced as far as rules and what we should be able to do?
Yeah, the image.
The image, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The image is straddling both that top div, which is turquoise, and the bottom one, which is white. How are we able to achieve this effect? And if we can do this, what else can we do? Okay, if we can do this, when should we do it? When should we avoid doing it? All these things are what we're going to talk about today. There's different ways that we can do this. And these ways here, I want to emphasize to use sparingly, really sparingly. Because if we get carried away abusing this rule that I will show, that you can make divs float over, the items float over divs. If you use it more than necessary, then it's going to be something that the rest of your, if you just, for example, move this image in both areas, and then because you did that, then you realize the H1 is not going in the right place. So you apply that rule to the H1 and then this P tag below it with this marker. And then everything else becomes an abuse of this rule, because it's like that game of telephone where you give one bad information and then it just gets even worse along the lines of communication. That's what's bound to happen here. If you over abuse this rule or rules, then you'll have a page that will become too knotted, too messy to really fix. In addition to that, if you abuse this rule that we're about to show, especially on the test, you're going to get points taken down. Okay. Only want you guys to use position flex or display flex unless it cannot be avoided and you have to do something like this. On the test, if you get a test where you can use this exception of a rule, it will explicitly say, for this section on the page, use position so-and-so. You can use position so-and-so. And there, so that introduces what we're talking about today. It's the rule called position. Okay, so before we get into position, we're going to get into CSS resets. Let's go over what that means first. Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce this topic to you guys. Here we go. Different browsers may give different browsers may give default attributes to HTML elements, causing sites to look different based on the version of the browser, whether you're seeing the site in Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, etc. So there's different default browser rules for the page that you would build to go across all of them. For example, in Internet Explorer, an H1 element may have a certain margin and padding, causing your site to look one way, while Chrome and Firefox may have the H1 a slightly different margin padding. These differences can cause a headache, especially if you're trying to make your site look consistent throughout different browsers/versions. So you have to account for the default padding that an H1 may have across browsers. And how we account for that is by setting all the defaults to 0. And if there's any padding necessary, then we add it in manually. Okay. So that's what this is going to explain. To solve many cross-browser issues, it's encouraged that you use reset and normalize, and basically define whatever the default attributes should be instead of relying on default values that come with the browser. In fact, technical recruiters love to ask you about this and see if you know how to make your site look consistent throughout different browsers. When they ask you this, you should be able to explain with confidence that what reset/normalizing means and why they are used. You should tell them that in addition to this, it's important to validate your HTML/CSS often, as validating the CSS/HTML gives insight on how you can fix issues that may lead to cross-browser compatibility issues. And often invalid HTML/CSS can lead to weird behavior, as the browser may not fix invalid HTML/CSS quite the right way. So all this is just saying reset and set your own values. That's the answer to the interview question. What do you do about other browsers? What's a reset or a normalize as far as cross browsers compatibility? It's really easy. This is all you have to do. You go into the CSS at the very top, you say to the all selector, padding equals 0, margin equals 0. Whatever default margin and padding were given to some rules, now they're going to be set to 0. So let's go ahead and do that here. Okay, create a Visual Studio. I'm going to open something here. The desktop, I'll say, oh, I opened the wrong one. Okay, while I open this, does anyone have any questions that I can answer? Everyone understands what's the necessity there for resetting the browser. Okay, then let's take a poll. How well we understand browser resets and why they're necessary. Cool. Okay, so let's give an example here. So I have my position folder. If I say index.html, style.css, link CSS. I give an H1 here. You guys have seen this before. Copy the path in here. If I have an H1 that says hello world, okay, See how there's a little bit of space to the left and to the top? That's the default padding there, padding and margin. See that space there, the yellow above, the yellow below. If you click that here, you can see there's a margin of 21.44 pixels. So you want to be able to eliminate that. You link the CSS style sheet, you go into the CSS, you say all margin 0, padding 0. If you refresh this now it's on the upper leftmost corner without any possible space that can be there. Okay, that's it in essence. Okay, let me try to create something else here so you guys see a better example. So if I create a div here and I say in my CSS, I want my divs. Let's eliminate this for now. I'm gonna comment it out. I'll say I want my divs to have a height of 100 pixels and to have a background color of purple. Okay, so I should be able to see that here. Actually, maybe I should give it some width.
Spelled purple wrong.
There we are. There's my box. Do you see how there's a little edge there on the top and on the left? That edge we want to eliminate because it may be different across browsers. And there will be these edges all over my page where I don't want them to be. So with this rule, margin 0, padding 0, when I apply it, that edge is gone. Okay, without the edge, with that little padding edge. Looks much better without, right? And so if we need any padding now, if we wanted it to have some padding from the top, now we would go into this div and say padding top 20 pixels or whatever. Padding adds to the inside, so we could say margin. For whatever reason, if we wanted a margin, then we can add a margin now by that little gap manually. But we don't want it to be there by default because it'll be there differently across browsers. Now you can go to this website here, and this is going to have a collection of different types of resets. There's something there's more than this, just a simple padding 0, margin 0. You can set the border to 0 as well. You can have outline, padding, margin 0. These are all still minimalistic resets. Now here's a CSS reset that takes into account what fonts would look like, the font weight, family, and style, how they should inherit their properties. Here you're setting HTML font size to be a standard size, for the body to have a font size of 100%. So what I would do, don't make this a priority of reading. Just for the sake of this class, margin 0, padding 0 is the only reset you need to really know. Then go into this link later, linked here in the platform. I'll link it in this chat. Bookmark it. Save it for when you are, when you have an hour or 30 minutes to study. and go through what the purpose of each reset would give in different situations. Okay, we know what padding and margin are, and border as well. So there's a different purpose for each of these different browser resets. There's some famous resets named after people. For example, this one is Sean Inman. This is Yahoo CSS reset. So for Yahoo across borders, across browsers, this is what they do. Eric Meyer has a famous reset. So all this information he puts at the top of his CSS page so that the rules are consistent across browsers. This is a condensed version. Okay, so something to read through on your own time. You can get into the world of resets, and it's a deep topic for something just seems like it should have been handled for us already. But in reality, when we create, that's why we like everyone to use the same browser, which for us, for developers, we should all be using Chrome. Okay, this is going to be something I'll emphasize more now if I don't see you using Chrome. Use Chrome for the way Chrome uses its inspect tool for consistency's sake. Okay, I'm using Chrome when I'm developing here, so you should be using it as well. But for now, all we need to know is margin 0, padding 0, and we're good to go. We're good to move on with that level of understanding. Okay. Any questions about resets so far? All right. So then let's go into the topic we were talking about position. And for this topic, I'm going to pull up W3 Schools position. So I'm going to say W3 Schools position. Okay. So you can see here, you can go to W3 Schools, the website that I just pulled up. I'll provide a link to this as well in the chat. And you can follow along or just have this bookmark for yourself. But we're going to be going over 3 position rules: position absolute, position fixed, and position relative. There's static and sticky and initial and inherit. We're going to forget those for now. We're just going to learn 3. Okay, 3 is all we need to learn today: position absolute, position fixed, and position relative. So I'm going to be going in that order. So for the way this lecture is structured, the level of understanding is going to be kind of low at first. And then when I'm going to explain what absolute does, what fixed does, and then what relative does. And then I'm going to go back to fixed and then back to absolute. By the time I get back to absolute, it'll make more sense. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull up some code that will help us understand what I'm doing here. Give me a second here. I'm pulling up Visual Studio. Oh, here I have it. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. So for the first example, I am taking straight from the platform. So I'm taking this text here, this HTML, and this CSS, and I've gone ahead and pasted it into a project here. This is the HTML and CSS. Let me just make sure that CSS looks good. So we have some rules we're going to comment out. So what we have here, let's take a look at what it looks like without any CSS rules. Here's what it is. We have a title. We have this message here, this div message, and it has a header. The header says, I am an alert. It has a p tag, arbitrary text, and then it has an OK button. So this div here, this one that says I am an alert, is what we're going to be moving around using the position property. As you can see here, it lives above the text. On the HTML, it's above the text. These are p tags. It's above these p tags. This is the whole view of our page. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply a position rule to it. And let's figure out together what changed, what's the difference. And by that change, we can determine what the meaning of the rule is. So for the first one, we're going to apply position absolute. In this case, the element is position relative to its first position ancestor element. So the element is positioned relative to its first ancestor element. So who's the ancestor of this guy? This div that says message? The ancestor would be this container. So it's going to move relative to that container. So let's see that in action. We'll say to this message, we'll say now position absolute. Okay, so if we say position absolute, now we see here that it's now overlapping some text. So let's do it side by side here. Okay. Without position absolute, the text is completely below it. With position absolute, the text goes up into the area that this message, the space that it was occupying. It's everything below it ignores what this message, where it was, and just moves into that space that message was occupying. It's as if it was ignored. The text just moved on up into that area. Okay, so let's see another example of this. Here I have another project. And I'm just going to check here. I'm going to say on this, excuse me. Let's move this around here. I need to fix this for 1 second. So we already have position absolute here. I do want to apply flex here. Okay, so here we have 3 boxes lined by side by side next to each other through display flex. I want to apply position absolute on the pink one and see what happens now. Okay, so I'm going to find my pink box. That is box 2. Box 2, we say position absolute. Now, before I apply position absolute, based on what we saw with the previous page where the text goes up underneath that area, it goes behind it, and it's completely ignoring that message. What do you think is going to happen now if I apply position absolute to the pink box? What's going to happen with the surrounding area? What's our prediction here?
Maybe it might just float over.
It might float. Okay, when we apply position absolute to the message was still on top, right? It was still visible, 100% visible. It's now the text behind it shrinked into that area, going into the space that was previously occupied by the message as if it wasn't there. So what could happen if we apply position absolute to this pink? Right now, without flex, each box stacks on top of each other. All I've done here is to make it now side by side. So if I apply position absolute to the pink one, the pink will move into the area of the first box. See what it was previously. Pink moves into the position of the first box. That green box is still there, but the blue moves over as well. So we're saying for this position absolute, the element is now positioned relative to its first position ancestor. So its first ancestor is this yellow box. This pink box's ancestor is this yellow box. When we say position absolute, it's going to position itself absolutely relative to this container, this yellow box. Now, if we say, now we want this pink box to be from the left 250 pixels, the pink box moves over all the way to the right. The blue one is still in its place because it's acting as if it can take up that space that the pink one was originally in. This pink one is only reacting to its direct descendant, this yellow box, okay? So now let's see here what happens if we apply some rule here to this one here, because this one has position absolute on it. Everything around it is ignoring its space. So if we say position absolute on this one, and we say left 250 pixels, left 250 pixels, position to its owner, to its container, it will go left 250 pixels. What if we just say 50 pixels? Then it goes all the way, it's only left to its original container 250, just 50 pixels here. If we say from the top, we want it to be 50 pixels, then from the very top, it's going to be 50 pixels of its container. The container, in this case, for this div, is this div called class container.
How come in this example, the text and the title, the header, everything else isn't being moved around like it was with the boxes?
So in this instance here, the only thing that moved was the pink box. When the pink box was all the way to the left. So let's go back to the CSS for this pink box here. It just moved to the position relative to its container. It's overlapping the green one. The green one is still there. And its neighbor moved over as if that space that it originally occupied is no longer there. So it's like in a layer above the green one.
So you're saying it's on top of the green one,
Yes.
but the blue one moved with it.
The blue one moved. So it's on top of the green one, and the blue one moves as if the pink one is no longer occupying the space it originally was in. Second out of 3. Let's remove this display flex. Let's remove absolute as well. So we have this yellow area. Its height is being determined by these 3 boxes. If we say position absolute for the pink, this blue one scoots up into the area that the pink one was occupying, as if the pink one wasn't there. Okay, now if we say from the left 250 pixels, it'll move to the left of where it was staying 250 pixels. Okay, so absolute is the most difficult one to understand. Let's move on to a couple more. And then when we go to these other ones, we'll be able to make more sense of position absolute. Okay, so we have position absolute. We'll go ahead and do a pull on position absolute at the very end. Right now, we are going to move into position fixed, actually relative. So in this case, it's saying the element is positioned relative to its normal position. Okay, so what does that mean? So for our pink box, if we say position relative, what happens to it? Doesn't really change anything, right? But if we say, okay, we want you to go then to the left, that space that it's occupying, it's still going to be respected by its neighbors. The blue one is not going to move into it. But now we can move this pink one relative to where it was, 250 pixels. And now it seems to jump over to the right that many pixels. We can say, let's say left 200 pixels instead of 250. Then it's slightly over the blue now. 180, even more over the blue. 150. 100. 80. Now it's just 50 pixels from the left, from the area it was originally in.
Why is it going over the blue instead of under?
Because it will go over. It gives it that.
Okay, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
So
just
it would
how it
also
works.
go over the green if
It will
you.
go over the green. So if I say right, if I say position relative and I say from the right, I want you to move 100 pixels. It's now 100 pixels from the right. It's now over the green.
So what if you did that with the blue and you said position relative right, however many pixels, would it overlap the pink or would the pink be over the blue?
Depends. So if I take off relative from the pink, if I take off this rule relative, and I just target the blue and I say position relative on the blue. And I say, now you want the blue to overlap or just move to the right?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I guess my initial question was if position relative was still on the pink,
Okay.
right? Because you were saying position relative, the pink moves and it overlaps the other boxes. But if another box like blue was also position relative, right? You move pink over to overlap the green and you
Yeah.
move blue enough to be in that same position, would blue overlap the pink or would pink have priority?
So let's say, if we say, I want blue to be relative, pink to be relative, I'll move blue from the right 150 pixels. Blue will overlap pink because this
Because it's on the bottom?
has it remember it's reading from top to bottom. So
Right.
position relative is gonna the most relative one is gonna be
Right, okay,
the blue one.
I got you. So it's just a matter of the cascading. So if pink was below blue in this CSS, then it would be flipped.
Yeah, let's go ahead and try that. In this case, they're actually, I've just moved the rule itself for pink to be relative. Let's say pink, if I say to the left, 20 pixels. What happens then, what in this case happens is the priority of the order of the boxes in the container start to take precedence in the rule of position. And this is why we want to say use it sparingly, because as soon as you start applying relative to a whole bunch of divs around the page, some are going to overlap others without any reason or rhyme here. Okay, so you only want to apply it to like maybe one div on the page, if ever at all, at a time. So in this case, I have the rule for pink below blue, but now the order of the boxes is what's making who stacks on top first here. Okay, so I'm going to undo what I just did here. And take away relative from the blue. Okay, so we're back to regular. What I want you guys to let me know if you understand is how relative works. It's going to move relative to the position that it was originally occupying, and its surrounding neighbors are going to respect its space. Okay, so let's get a poll. Do we understand how position relative works? Okay, so let's give another example. I have here this pop-up text. And in this message, I'm going to say position relative. It's in the same space it was already occupying. The text below it doesn't go in, tuck in behind it as if this didn't exist. Everything around it is still going to respect the space it was originally occupying, whether it moves from there or not. So if I say position relative to its original occupied space from the left, then it's going to move from the left, that space over. See, that's why there's a little gap on this area right here where I'm hovering. And on the right, it's going over the page, that column, because it's moved from the left. I can move it from the top, say 150 pixels. Now we have that gap that it was occupying. The text didn't move into that area. With position absolute, it would have moved into that area. In this case, if I say 190 pixels from the top, it's completely hovering over this area that we have our article, our text. And that's the same thing we got for the pink. Space would have been originally respected. Its original space, its empty lot. It's as if it has a paid parking space. Like, you know, when you have those apartments that have those spots where you park, even when you move your car, if someone else parks in your spot, they're going to get a ticket. So no one's going to go into your parking space with position relative. Okay, position relative. So that's how that works. We have the very last one, fixed. And we'll see what this does now. So for our article, let's remove from the top 190 pixels. Let's remove all these as well. And we'll say, I want my position of my thing here, of my message, to be fixed. Okay, now like with absolute, the content surrounding it will move into its spot. And what does the rule for fixed say? It says the element is positioned relative to the browser window. What could that mean? That means the whole entire browser window, this whole entire window itself is now what it's moving relative to. So we'll say position fixed from the left, 5 pixels. Now it's saying fixed to the window itself, regardless of all the divs on the page where this div exists. On the window itself, I want it to be 5 pixels from the left. So it's moved 5 pixels from the left. So now at any point, if I expand or open my window, it's always going to be 5 pixels from the left of its original position that it was occupying. From the browser, from its original position. So if I now say from the top, 5 pixels, it finds the space that it was already, that y-axis, x-axis, it was already occupying, but then we say now actually from the top, I want you to be 5 pixels from that space. So it goes up 5 pixels from the top of the entire browser window. Okay, let's see this in action with this box, these 3 boxes. I have my pink box I want to affect. And in this pink box, I'm going to say position fixed, right? That's the one we were saying. Fixed to the browser window. Okay, it behaves a lot like absolute. The difference is it's not adjusting to its container. It's not doing anything relative to this yellow container that holds them both. It's now acting fixed from the browser. So if I say bottom, 100 pixels, I'm asking this thing now to go 100 pixels from the bottom. So that's why it jumps all the way down there. So with the same effect as absolute, where it now goes to the position it's allowed to be in. In this case, when we said flex on 3 div boxes, it moved into the greens area. The blue moved into the pinks area as if the pink space, the pink space was no longer respected. As soon as you say position for fixed or absolute, that parking space can be taken. Okay, and it will be taken. So it's been taken, and now we say position fixed. That means fixed to the browser. If we say 100 pixels from the bottom, it will go up 100 pixels from the bottom. If I say to the left as well, 1,000 pixels. Now we have it all that way over here, this pink box. So who can give me an idea of what we may use this for if we go on a if we're creating a web page, for example, for a company? Has anyone ever seen something that's been positioned something like right in the middle of a page? Could someone give me an example?
Like an ad.
Like an ad, like a pop-up, right? Like maybe one of those messages at the bottom of the page that says, I want your cookies. Please accept that we will track your cookies if you visit our site. Okay, those pop-ups that happen in the middle of the screen that don't let you see any of the content, they're blocking the content unless you acknowledge it and press OK or click the X button to X out of it. That's what you would use position fixed for, because anywhere on the browser window, no matter how big or small they will expand it, that huge message will be there to block their view of the page until they do something with it, until they deal with it. Okay, so
Can we use percentages instead of pixels?
yeah, let's try that. So I'll say from the left, I want you to be 50%. So there it is, 50%. If I close this in, it's still going to want to take 50% of that width view. So let's see from the bottom, I want it to be 50% as well. So now, no matter how we expand our page, height or width, it will be in right dead center, 50%.
Can you use that on like an entire container instead of just one particular item?
On the entire container instead of one particular item? I don't know what you mean exactly.
So like if you have like in one of the videos, it was talking about the Lego concept, how you look at a web page as different blocks.
Yes.
If you take one entire particular block that has maybe 3 or 4 other blocks in it, can you take that larger block and apply position
Yeah,
fixed to it?
totally. Totally. Look at this one here. We've applied fixed to this one, and this one contains this header here that says I'm an alert. It has the P tag. So we can target the one that has all the components on the inside, and we can move it anywhere on the page with position fixed, as long as we're targeting that one that contains all of them. And again, you only want to use it sparingly once per page, because then again, you know, the rules are not completely safe to be mixing more than one div to have fixed on there, or one to have more than one absolute or more than one relative. I'd say there's very specific reasons why you would want to use them. For example, let's say in a video game or something, when you're creating we don't really create browser video games so much anymore, but for this pink box, let's say it's the main character, and it's always going to stay in the center. That's something like a character in a video game, always going to be in the center of the page, no matter what the view of its environment is. So this is an example of how to use fixed. It's relative to the browser, not any particular div or container in the browser. And we can say position from the left, position from the right, from the top, so many pixels or percentage. So let's see, can we give a poll on how well we understand fixed in this case? Okay. So then let's go over each one more time, and then that will end today's lecture. So then what's going to happen here if I say position relative for the boxes? If I say position relative on the pink box, it doesn't move at all. Its space is respected, and we can move it to any space, and its parking spot's not going to be occupied. You can say from the top, I want you to be 250 pixels. It'll move from that position that it was in from the top, and its parking space will be respected. Okay. All right. Now, who can tell me what absolute does? Why is it there if I say from the top 250 pixels?
It
Because
moves
it's absolute
where,
position. Okay.
now go ahead, man.
Because its absolute position is relative to, I'm guessing, the leftmost part of the window where, what color box was that at? The green or blue box was? The green
Yeah.
box, but then you also added a position of the top 250 that took it 250 pixels away from the top.
Right. So it ignores its neighbor's parking spots. It will park its car over its neighbor's parked car, and the neighbors will move into that into that parking space it originally occupied. So that's what's happening there. The blue moved over into the pink's parking space. The pink actually didn't care and parked over the green. And now we said from the top, we want it to be 250 pixels. So it doesn't respect anyone else's space, and its own space doesn't get respected. And relative to its container, okay, relative to its first position ancestor element, that means its container, it can move wherever you tell it. So for example, if I say to its container here, this yellow one, if I go to this yellow one and I say, I want you to have like a margin left 200 pixels, it will move over 200 pixels with it because it's still in the bounds of its container, of its master, its direct descendant. But it's moving over to its neighbor's space. Its space got occupied, and it's moving 250 from the top. Check out the difference between this and fixed. Okay. Well, actually, what was the one relative to the browser window? Okay. So in this case, I've said margin left 250 pixels. Margin, oh, from the top. Okay, so we want to say from the left 5 pixels. Look in this case. Even though the yellow has a margin left of 200 pixels, the pink, we said we just want it to be from the left 5 pixels. If we say from the top 250 pixels, it's outside of the control of the container of the yellow here.
So with the absolute position, you can't do that with the top, left, right, bottom, with the individual item. because it's moving relative to the container. Right.
It's moving relative to the container.
Right.
Exactly.
So you can't give it extra positioning with like you can with fix, right? With
With
fix, you can
fixed,
say,
yeah, we're using the whole entire browser view as the reference point when we're saying left top. Absolute is saying relative absolutely to your container, then you can move these many pixels left or right. And what was the other one called? Relative. Relative will only move relative to its original position that it was already occupying. Okay, so I'm introducing these rules to tell you don't ever use them. Okay, it's a forbidden technique. So if I catch you using it out there in the ninja world, we'll have to have a showdown. I'll say, you betrayed my teaching.
Jutsu.
You betrayed my teaching. I'll have to destroy you now. Okay, no. That's not what's gonna happen. What's gonna happen is you'll just get a bad score on your grade. I'm gonna say, I told you not to use this. You're only supposed to use it when we tell you specifically we want you to use it. So the only instance on the test, I'll just say it now, is for when you're creating a cookies menu bar with position fixed. That's the only instance you'll ever use fixed on the test. Don't use it for anything else ever on the test. Okay, no position rules. Only use display flex. Because again, if you start saying, okay, oh, relative to my window, then I want this to be, 20 pixels from the top, 20 pixels to the left. You figure, oh, I guess I can have complete freedom in moving everything. I don't have to think about this column row system at all. I can just say at this, absolutely, I want it to be this position here. It makes it no effort in programming, but in fact, you're making it, it's like you're creating something that you can't easily manipulate. You can't really make it a dynamic website. And by dynamic, I'll explain what I mean later. But for now, we want things to just be perfectly aligned using display flex. Okay, it'll make more sense by next week's Friday lecture why we're going this path. But trust us when we say don't use position. This is not using it is going to get you to make you that much better than your competitors as far as being developers or programmers, okay? If you get onto the job field and you see someone using position fixed, absolute, sticky, then you can have reason to raise concern saying this, I'm not sure this person knows what they're doing. This is not the way things should be done. Okay, now, does anyone have any questions, any more questions on position fixed, absolute, or relative? Can we understand what instances we may use them? So someone just reiterate it back to me. What instance may we use, for example, position fixed?
Pop-ups.
Don't be shy. Go ahead.
Pop-ups.
A pop-up, yeah. A pop-up on our browser, something that says you have to acknowledge me before you view the content on the page. Definitely. And that's probably the only instance. So, okay. So now we know, okay, how we can move this to be over two browsers at the same, over two divs at the same time. We'd have to create this image inside this teal area and use a position property to move it around from its original area so that it overlaps into the white. Okay, and we have some videos that we would want you to watch here. We have this assignment called profile page. This page here is going to give you some of the best practice for the test. So the first time you create it, it's going to take you a good amount of time. And there's something very specific to this page that I want to give you guys the answer now on how to make this page work properly. But if I don't let you fail on it, if you fail, then you won't appreciate the lesson later on of how to correct it. Okay, so you have to struggle with this one. And it's, in a sense, it's even good for you if you fail in trying to make it. You'll get so far and realize, oh, I can't move the things that I want to where I want them to be. And so that's the struggle we want you guys to go through, so that when this afternoon I recreate a website, you'll be able to understand how you should have approached this page as a problem. Okay, so there's this. I'm letting you know now, this problem has a bit of a trick to it. There's something funny with it that you have to fix. You have to be aware of. Can anyone want to tell me what it is? I won't say the solution now, but can anyone point out what's odd about this site? Besides,
for me, having tried to mess with it all day last night or whatever, my toughest part was the connection request and the connections box.
okay, why is that?
Yeah, maybe I'm just not using things. Probably, I think also, if I go back and look at it, I probably did use position too much. So I'll probably have to go back and like delete a lot of those positions and only use it for the one thing on the Jane Doe part. But connection requests and the connections, I'm just kind of struggling on the positioning of it. I don't know if that's what you were alluding to.
Kind of, yeah. Here, I'll point it out now. I'll point it out now. What it is, well, okay, let's do an example here. As of now, all of our divs on all of our projects and all of our columns have been separated into neat little areas. So if we have 4 divs here, until this project, whenever we needed separation between divs, we could just separate them, for example, into rows. So this one here would be a row and this one here would be a separate row. And all the intersections up to this point have been straight, like crosses. Okay, all the intersections have been perpendicular crosses. But look at what we have here. In this area now, we go through here. This isn't a cross. This is a zigzag. So how is it that we are supposed to account for this zigzag?
Do you want an answer, or do you just want us to think about that?
If you have the answer, don't say it out just yet, unless
Okay.
someone asks you specifically in a breakout room.
All right.
For those that haven't figured it out, I want them to have that aha moment, because it comes through struggle. Like if you try to solve this without realizing there's an issue, okay? If you try to make a row with all this content, for example, to have connection requests and that profile card, what you see here is that this area for your connections, that area there, let's make it blue instead of yellow. See how it's kind of, it's intersecting. It's like inside that row. So if you create a row, you won't be able to make this go over into this, we're not, you're going to use position to make this go into this area. We're not going to let you do that. So you can't use position to make this your connections square go into this row. Okay. What if you divide it another way? What if you say, for example, I want to make a row that has education and your connections. Well, where are you going to start the row? If you start it here, then the profile card is now going into that row, right? So this blue card is now intersecting into that row. How else could you divide it? Well, okay, what if we say we're not going to start from up there? We'll just have it here. But then if you do this, now that your connections is sticking out of this row that has the education card in it. So it's not as simple as I'm going to create a main content area and create 4 divs that go into it. There's a bit of a caveat to how you create this area, okay? And I'm going to be checking your guys' progress, especially with this one, to make sure you guys understand this concept, because understanding how to create this page in particular is the key to understanding how to create any page. Okay.
So my question, can we create this page with what we've learned or no?
Yes, definitely. You
Okay.
can create this page with, I don't have to teach anything new. What I will have to do is refine based on the lessons. I haven't taught this specific technique exactly yet, but I'm going to hope to emphasize it in this afternoon's lecture. So I want you guys to get to this point, finish the user card, get to profile page, and really struggle with this. I'm going to give the solution for it, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do another page using the same technique. Okay, so I want you guys to pay attention to the specific technique that you would use here, and then apply it to whatever page you decide that you will want to mimic. And I'll give you guys some practice pages, okay? So the way you guys understand, this is what this project usually takes some of the most time compared to the rest of them. So if you're doing well on time on this one here, then you're doing well in general so far. So this is the first major hurdle, I would say, this profile page. Okay, so with that challenge being defined, I wish you guys the best, and I want you guys to rely on each other for help. And if you cannot get, in this case, if you just ask one person and you get 2 people that are stuck, try to get a 3rd person before we start answering Kaya and I in our offices how to solve this one. And I want you to get to the point where you've already tried an attempt to make it look like the way you see it here. Okay, it's the only place you'd use position is to make this profile card go into this straddling teal and white area. That's the only place you use position. Everywhere else, you should just use flex.
I got a question. It says we strongly suggest working in groups and pair programming. So should we try it on our own and then get into groups only if we're struggling? So are you gonna have like a struggle breakout room or something?
Yeah, that's generally a good rule. Do it on your own. Don't just rely on the group to begin with. Yeah, it's easy just to work with the group, and then struggle on your own. Struggle on your own.
Can we struggle together?
Struggle together once you've already struggled on your own.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a bit of individual problem solving, but don't waste too much time on individual problem solving. If you get past 20, 30 minutes, then say, hey, did you get it? Nope. Okay, let's try to figure this out together. And for those that figure it out on your own without asking, let me know what led to that aha moment of you figuring out how to do this one. Okay. So that ends today's lecture time. I've gone well over the time. I need to stop the recording. Let's go over the schedule here. I'm going to open up this code review as soon as I can. I'll let you guys know in the Discord when you guys will be able to sign up for 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock reviews today, all the way through Tuesday. I'll be working on that soon, so keep an eye out for that on Discord. And then today's end of day are going to be the profile page and user card. So they're just the 2 assignments I went over. The user card and then the profile page. And then the homework is to read through functions, conditionals, loops, debugging arrays, variables, types, operators. So you guys should know what all of these are already because of programming basics, right? We all know what operators are, variables, different types of data. So what programming basics did is prepare you for tomorrow, which is going to be all of JavaScript condensed into 1 hour lecture. And then on Monday, we're going to be figuring out how to connect JavaScript with our HTML and CSS. Okay, so in order for you to be fully understanding Monday's lecture, you need to complete the profile page by tomorrow. Okay, get it done by tomorrow because you don't want to be working on Thursday's stuff on Monday. So I'll leave you guys to it. I'll stop talking to let you guys work now. Does anyone have any questions? I don't think I ran out of Siri jokes, guys. You guys know where I'm getting this from.
Why does a dog make a bad dancer?
Why does a dog make a bad dancer?
Because it has 2 left feet.
How do you get a tissue to dance? Put a little boogie in it.
I told this one yesterday, but most of the people left, so I'll just say it again. My friend Robert was going on and on about how great it is to cook food on a stick. So I just said, "K, Bob." That's so dumb. I gotta leave now. All right, see you guys. Enjoy the breakout room.